I moved into Brookside Hills with a vision. After retiring from over 2 decades of military service, all I wanted was a quiet neighborhood, somewhere I could work on my cars in peace. I'd spent most of my adult life serving this country, first in the Army and later in a military intelligence role, where paranoia wasn't a flaw but a survival mechanism. I'd learned to read people, situations, and signs. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the war I was about to wage against the Homeowners Association, or more precisely, its tyrannical president, Karen Wilcox. Brookside Hills looked like paradise on the surface. Manicured lawns, clean sidewalks, neighbors waving as they walked golden retrievers in coordinated jackets. Every house was identical in architecture: pastel siding, white trim, picket fences, and American flags fluttering, like clockwork. There was something eerie about the perfection, but I tried not to let it get to me. I was more interested in the 4-car garage that came with the property, finally enough room to house my collection: a '67 Mustang GT, a '59 Chevy Apache, a '92 Acura NSX, and my favorite of all, a 1973 Porsche 911 Carrera RS that I had restored bolt by bolt. That Porsche wasn't just a car, it was my father's. He was a man of few words, but every weekend of my teenage years was spent in his old garage, our hands dirty, grinding metal and arguing about carburetors. When he died, the Porsche came to me, rusted and silent, a relic of another time. Restoring it gave me focus during the hardest years of my military life. It became my therapy, my legacy, and ultimately my reward to myself for surviving long enough to retire. From the very beginning, I sensed friction from Karen Wilcox. She was one of those HOA presidents who took the position way too seriously. Her emails came in daily, always CCing the entire board. Trim your hedges by exactly 2.5 inches. Front lawn ornaments must be no taller than 18 inches. Vehicles with visible modifications must be approved and parked out of public view. She introduced herself to me the week I moved in by asking if I planned on keeping those eyesores, pointing to my covered cars, in the neighborhood for long. At first I tried diplomacy. I offered her a tour of the garage to show her that I wasn't running a repair shop. Everything was clean, well-organized, and completely within code. But Karen wasn't interested in conversation. She was interested in control. She'd smile with her lips but not her eyes, always trying to assert authority like she owned the entire community. When I politely declined her request to move the Porsche into a covered transport lot for aesthetics, the relationship soured instantly. Weeks passed. I minded my own business, keeping everything locked up and pristine. I installed a top-tier surveillance system: 4 cameras, remote storage, motion detection, encrypted backups, the whole deal. My garage was my sanctuary, and the Porsche, well, that car sat on velvet tire cushions with a military-grade GPS tag concealed under the dash. I wasn't just a hobbyist, I was an operator. That car wasn't going anywhere, or so I thought. The theft happened on a Thursday morning in early fall. I had a dental appointment on the other side of town and left the house around 8 a.m. I remembered distinctly that the sky was overcast, and I debated whether I should put the cover back over the Porsche or leave it off. I chose to leave it off. The garage was secure after all. When I returned around noon, I noticed immediately that something was off. My mailbox was slightly ajar, though I always shut it tightly. The garage light was on, though I hadn't turned it on before leaving. My stomach tightened. I approached the garage slowly, remote in hand. The door slid open halfway, then jammed. That never happened. I squeezed under the partially opened frame and stepped inside, only to be met with a gaping void. The Porsche, gone. The velvet cushions still sat there, indented. The floor was clean, no broken glass, no tire marks. The car had been lifted, clean, like a magician's trick. Vanished. For a long moment, I just stood there, numb. It felt like a betrayal, This neighborhood, this house, this sense of security, all of it suddenly meaningless. I rushed to the office and yanked open the drawer where I stored the DVR backups for the cameras. Gone. The entire backup stack, missing. I cursed under my breath and ran to the cloud server I paid extra for. Disconnected. Someone had cut the feed, scrubbed the logs, and left no digital trail. Whoever did this wasn't a joyrider. They were professionals. They knew my security system inside and out. They knew I would be gone. They knew exactly what they were doing. I called the police and filed a report. The responding officer was kind enough, but clearly not hopeful. He gave me the usual lines. We'll circulate the VIN, check local chop shops, and classic cars like that usually get loaded into containers and shipped within hours. I asked if they could check the HOA security feeds. He frowned and told me they'd have to submit a formal request through the HOA board. I knew right then that this wasn't going to be a simple case of follow the clues. So I called in Reggie, a friend from the old days. Reggie had done military intelligence, security contracting, and now worked as a private investigator. I trusted him with my life. I gave him the rundown, and within a few hours, he was combing through gate logs, phone tower pings, and canvassing neighbors with a casualness that didn't arouse suspicion. It took 2 days, but what he found blew the case wide open. Karen Wilcox, HOA president and my uninvited nemesis, had called a private towing company just 2 days before the Porsche went missing. She'd claimed to be enforcing compliance on an illegally parked vehicle, even provided a doctored photo of my garage with the door halfway open. The towing company had a contract signature, not mine, and had picked up the car at exactly 10:42 a.m. on the day I was gone. They took it not to an impound, but to a warehouse outside the city. Reggie got the GPS ping from the tow truck's dashcam log, and we paid the warehouse a visit. It was your typical shady vehicle depot, large steel roll-up doors, no signage, camera-free lot. Reggie launched a small drone through a broken skylight. Inside, beneath a dusty tarp, was my Porsche, untouched, pristine, waiting for transport. But there were other cars, too. A cherry-red Dodge Charger, a 70s Pontiac GTO, a blacked-out Tesla Model S with dealership plates. Reggie's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a theft, it was an operation. He started digging into Karen's background. Public records, tax forms, real estate filings. Turns out, Karen had registered an LLC last year called Wilcox Asset Recovery, claiming to specialize in HOA enforcement repossessions. On the surface, it sounded legitimate, but when you traced the paper trail, it led to a network of shell companies, fake compliance tickets, and property liens that targeted out-of-town owners or passive neighbors. My Porsche was just the latest and most valuable target. Reggie found more: bank transfers to a known black market auto broker, email correspondence with forged documents showing fabricated HOA violations, even messages where Karen talked about flipping this one for 6 figures and presumably referring to my Porsche. It was enough to build a case, but we needed help. That's when I called my son. He'd been working with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force for 5 years. Smart, calm, methodical, the kind of guy who didn't flinch even when facing cartel informants. I told him everything. At first, he didn't believe it. "You're saying your HOA president is running a car theft ring?" he said. I forwarded him Reggie's evidence. 10 minutes later, he called back and said, "Okay, this just got interesting." With his guidance, we set the trap. The FBI quietly tagged the warehouse. They watched the tow company, intercepted Karen's digital footprint, and staged a buyer. Meet using an undercover agent posing as a European collector. Karen took the bait. Hard. But the real beauty? She showed up in my Porsche, driving it herself, license plates swapped, VIN scratched, but still unmistakably mine. She was arrested on the spot, along with the tow truck operator, the warehouse owner, and two accomplices who'd been scouting cars in nearby neighborhoods. It made headlines. HOA president busted in classic car heist ring. The news vans came. Karen's house was swarmed with reporters. And me? I just sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching justice finally deliver a hard left hook. But the real surprise came after the arrest, when the rest of the HOA board began unraveling too. Turns out, Karen wasn't the only one with skeletons in her garage. The courtroom lights buzzed faintly above us, casting a sterile glow over the polished wood panels and solemn faces. Karen sat in the defendant's chair, still clutching the delusion that she was going to talk her way out of this. But her confident smirk was slowly cracking. The moment she saw the FBI agents walk in with a thick stack of evidence, including security footage, GPS records, and bank statements, her composure started to falter. But let's rewind a bit, back to the moment the FBI officially took over the case. Once I had presented the initial evidence, ownership documents of the Porsche, security footage of Karen driving it, and my filed police report, the local authorities escalated it to the FBI. See, this wasn't just about a stolen vehicle. The car had a rare VIN associated with multiple cross-border restorations and custom modifications, which made its theft a federal issue, especially when it was found listed for sale on a European auto auction site. Someone, presumably Karen, had tried to sell it online under a fake name and fake documents, but the Porsche's digital registration flagged it immediately. The FBI set a trap. They let the listing stay live and tracked IP addresses, monitored communications, and even arranged a buyer to engage Karen's alias. It didn't take long before she made a critical mistake, logging into the site from her home Wi-Fi. That was all they needed. A few days later, she opened her door to a badge instead of a buyer. They took her in for questioning, where she tried spinning a wild story about how I had abandoned the car and how she had rescued it from being ruined. She claimed that, as HOA president, she had the right to impound vehicles in violation of community regulations, except the car wasn't parked on HOA land. It was on my private property in a locked garage behind surveillance while I was out of town. Once the agents realized Karen had forged at least 3 different documents to support her narrative, including fake transfer of title paperwork, the charges escalated to grand theft auto, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and attempted sale of stolen property across state lines. That Porsche had been more than a car. It was now a legal sledgehammer. During the trial, the community started to wake up. Residents who once feared Karen or blindly followed her orders began to question everything. They came forward with their own stories, how she had abused her authority, issued arbitrary fines, towed cars she didn't like, and silenced anyone who stood up to her. One neighbor revealed Karen had been threatening him with violations for having a bird feeder because she claimed it attracted unruly wildlife. The courtroom audience swelled with homeowners eager to see her fall. The HOA board, under mounting pressure, held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend her indefinitely pending the outcome of the trial. That was the polite way of saying they were cutting her loose to save face. I watched all of it unfold with a quiet satisfaction, knowing justice was finally catching up to her. My testimony was straightforward. I laid out the timeline, showed the footage, and provided the title, insurance, and DMV registrations. When the prosecution asked me to describe the significance of the car, I didn't have to embellish anything. "This car was my father's last gift to me," I said. "He restored it bolt by bolt with his own hands. It's not just a Porsche, it's our family's legacy." That line hit harder than expected. Even the judge seemed affected. Karen's defense lawyer tried everything, from pleading mental stress to painting her as a misunderstood civic leader, but none of it worked. Not when faced with hard facts and federal surveillance data. The jury took less than 2 hours to find her guilty on all counts. Sentencing day was packed. The media showed up, drawn in by the bizarre combination of a stolen vintage car, a rogue HOA president, and an FBI sting. Karen arrived looking like someone who still believed she might walk out free. But when the judge read out the sentence, 5 years in federal prison, a $100,000 fine, and mandatory restitution to me for damages, towing, and legal fees, her face went blank. Not rage, not sadness, just shock. Like reality had finally ripped the mask off. After the verdict, people in the neighborhood started approaching me, not just to apologize for not believing me earlier, but to thank me. "You stood up to her when none of us could," one man said. "She ruled with fear, and you shattered that." Others came with stories of minor thefts, unfair HOA punishments, and threats that suddenly made more sense now that they knew the person behind them. I got the Porsche back, fully intact thanks to the FBI's careful handling. I restored it again, not because it needed repairs, but because I wanted to add a new chapter to its legacy. I even added a hidden dash cam and a discreet GPS tracker just in case. That car had already lived one incredible story. It was ready for whatever came next. The HOA, in the wake of the scandal, held a community vote. They restructured the board, rewrote bylaws, and implemented transparency protocols. Karen's name became something whispered like folklore, a cautionary tale told to new residents. I was asked to join the board myself, but I declined. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. One evening, weeks after the case had wrapped up, I took the Porsche out for a drive. Sunset painted the road gold, the engine purred like an old friend, and for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt right again. As I turned a corner, I saw the spot where Karen used to host her ridiculous HOA meetings in her driveway, complete with folding chairs and a megaphone. Now it was empty, quiet, restored, just like my car, just like my life.